So today we're rendering lard. I've got my big hunk of lard here.
Not that you're gonna say my big hunk of husband here.
I do have my big hunk of husband here. He's my cameraman. So what I'm doing is just cutting the lard into smaller pieces. This can also be ground in your meat grinder, but I'm not doing a big batch today, so I didn't want to get it out and wash it, to be honest with you. So I'm just going to be chopping. Took some big slices off of the big piece of lard, and I'm just chopping them up into smaller little cubes to get some more surface area. Once we get it into the pot where we are doing low and slow rendering the lard, it's a long process. It's going to take several hours because you don't want a burnt taste to your lard. So this will continue until I'm done, and then I'll get this put into the pot where it will render low and slow for a couple of hours. Your little crackling pieces in there, you're going to end up with, they're going to sink, and then they're going to float up again. So we'll pan over to that in just a second.
What kind of lard is this?
This is pig lard, pig fat, which we're rendering into lard. And lard we can use for cooking, frying, bacon. Our ancestors used to cook with lard. And Americans in general have moved away from cooking with it, but it's actually a very healthy fat when it comes from, this is the but, when it comes from pigs that were raised in a natural environment, not in a giant warehouse where they never get to see the sun. Because this stuff is loaded with vitamin D, because the animals that live in a pasture and get to see the sun their bodies get to create vitamin C. They're not lacking, which is important, I feel, for an animal to live its most natural life possible, to breathe fresh air, to lay in the grass, to play in a mud hole, to eat naturally and live its best life. And then what we get from that pig in return is healthy products. One of those being lard. I challenge you to start cooking more with farm produced pastured pig lard. It'll change your life. Okay, so this is our already hot pot. I'm just adding some fresh chunks of lard in there. I started this before I finished chopping everything, and I'm just adding the cold chunks that I've cut up in there, and then I'm going to stir them around. And like I said, this is a low and slow, not a fast hot process. Otherwise your lard will render not a beautiful white color. So once we have our final product, I will jar it up. It will be kind of a golden color in the jar when we first get it in there, and once it cools, it'll be a beautiful creamy white color. So that's it. Nothing exciting happening. It'll keep rendering. We've got quite a bit at the bottom of the pot already, but I've got the burner on low, and we'll just let this keep going. It's going pretty good now. All we've got are little pieces of rendered fat, so we'll keep going. You can see the fat is floating now. I'm not sure if you can tell. Look at this. Once it sinks again, we should be ready to go. Okay, so we are filtering the cracklings out, and what we have left is lard. After this, I'll pour it into clean mason jars, and they'll be ready for the shelf. So we're pouring it into our clean mason jars. At this point, it's fairly golden, but once it cools fully, it will be a beautiful white. So here's the finished lard. It has cooled and it is solid, and it's a nice creamy white. Ready to go.